Get out of my apartment. Adaeze did not set her bag down. She did not smile. She stood in the doorway of Unit 4B on the 14th floor of a building in Mapogu, Seoul, with her rolling suitcase behind her and her internship offer letter folded in her coat pocket, and she stared at the man sitting at the kitchen counter like he belonged there. Because he looked like he did. He had a mug of coffee, a laptop open, a half-eaten bowl of rice pushed to the side. He was wearing a gray sweater and reading glasses he clearly did not need, because when he looked up at her, his eyes were sharp and calm and completely unbothered. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my apartment," Adaeze said. "I booked it 3 months ago. I have the confirmation email, the lease agreement, and the receipt, so I'm going to need you to get out." The man took off his glasses slowly, set them on the counter, looked at her the way people look at someone they're trying very hard to be patient with. "My name is Shin Jae-hoon," he said. "I've been living here for 6 weeks. My lease runs for another 4 months. I also have a confirmation email, a lease agreement, and a receipt." Adaeze blinked. "That's not possible." And yet, he gestured at the apartment with one hand. The very lived-in, very occupied apartment, with his shoes by the door and his jacket on the hook and his books stacked by the window. Her stomach dropped. The landlord arrived 20 minutes later, a small, apologetic man named Mr. Beek who kept bowing and saying the words "system error" like they were a prayer. The booking platform had double-listed the unit. Both reservations were valid. Both contracts had been legally signed. He had not noticed because payments had come from different accounts on different dates. "I am so deeply sorry," Mr. Beek said. "Unfortunately, the building is fully occupied. The entire district has an accommodation shortage because of the infrastructure summit this month. Every nearby unit I know of is booked." "So what are we supposed to do?" Adaeze asked. Mr. Beek looked between them. He looked like a man who wanted to disappear into the floor. "There is one option," he said carefully. "If both parties are willing, a temporary co-occupancy arrangement, 30 days, until I can source a replacement unit for one of you at no extra cost." Silence. Adaeze looked at Jae-hoon. Jae-hoon looked at Adaeze. "Absolutely not," they both said at exactly the same time. That was how it began. Adaeze Obi had come to Seoul from Lagos with 23 years of ambition, a first-class degree in visual communications, and a 6-month UX design internship at one of the fastest-growing tech companies in East Asia. She had saved for this, planned every detail. She was not the kind of woman who left things to chance, and she was absolutely not the kind of woman who shared an apartment with a strange man she had met 40 minutes ago. But by 9 o'clock that night, after 3 failed calls to alternative accommodations, one very long conversation with her mother who said, "Adaeze, you are in a foreign country. Please do not sleep on the street," and the grim reality of a city that was fully booked for 30 days, she was standing in the kitchen making jollof rice from the ingredients she had brought in her suitcase, because she had been that prepared, and Shin Jae-hoon was at the other end of the counter, pretending to work. And neither of them said a word, until she put the rules on the fridge. She had written them on a yellow sticky note in her neatest handwriting. 1. No entering each other's rooms without knocking. 2. Bathroom, she takes mornings 6-7 a.m. He takes 7-8 a.m. 3. No personal questions. 4. Groceries are separate, labels on everything. 5. 30 days. Then this arrangement ends and we never speak of it again. Jae-hoon read the list, looked at her, looked back at the list. "You numbered them," he said. "I like order." "So do I," he said. "Which is why I'd like to add Rule 6, no Afrobeats before 7 a.m. She stared at him. It was one song. It was 4 songs, at 6:15 in the morning. That is called a morning routine. That is called noise pollution. She took the sticky note off the fridge and added Rule 6 in slightly less neat handwriting, because her hand was shaking slightly with the effort of not saying something she would regret. Then she stuck it back and walked to her room without another word. Living with a stranger turned out to be exactly as difficult as Adaeze had expected, and somehow also different in ways she hadn't. The difficult parts were predictable. Jae-hoon was an architect working on a city-commissioned waterfront development project, which meant he worked long hours and moved through the apartment like he was trying not to disturb the air. He kept everything in precise order. His mugs were arranged by size. His shoes were always parallel. When she accidentally moved his notebook 2 inches to the left, he picked it up and moved it back without a word, but she saw him do it, and it sent a very specific kind of irritation crawling up her spine. She, by contrast, thought in organized chaos. She worked late into the night with reference images pinned everywhere, color-coded tabs open on 5 browser windows, sticky notes on every available surface. Twice, she accidentally stuck one to his laptop. He peeled them off without reading them. She told herself she didn't care that he didn't read them. They argued about the thermostat, about dishes that spent too long in the sink, about whether the balcony plants needed water twice a week or every other day, about the fact that she hummed while she cooked, and he claimed it broke his concentration from all the way in his room with the door closed. "You can hear me humming through a closed door," she said. "You hum very loudly," he said. "I don't hum loudly, I hum with emotion. There is a difference." He looked at her for a moment, and something at the corner of his mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was clearly something, and she decided she hadn't seen it and turned back to the stove. The different parts were harder to explain. One evening in the second week, she came home from work at 11:30, too tired to cook, and found a covered plate on the counter with a sticky note on it that said, "Left over from dinner. Not poison. Jay." She stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at that sticky note. She ate the food. It was doenjang jjajiggy with perfectly cooked rice, and it was the best thing she had eaten since arriving in Seoul, and she was furious about it. The next morning, she made extra akara and left them on the counter with a note that said, "Breakfast. Don't thank me. A." When she came back that evening, the plate was empty and there was a second note underneath hers. "I wasn't going to, but they were exceptional. Jay." She did not smile. She folded the note very carefully and put it in the pocket of her coat, and told herself it was because she was a sentimental person by nature, which was true, and not because the note meant anything, which she was less sure about. She started to notice things she hadn't meant to. The way he always left the door open slightly whenever it rained, so the smell came in. The sketchbooks he left on the coffee table sometimes, full of buildings she didn't recognize, drawn in the kind of obsessive detail that meant he had been doing it for years. The fact that he always cleaned the kitchen before he went to bed, not because he was fastidious, but because, she realized one night, watching him without meaning to, because he found it calming. Like the act of putting things in order was the only way he knew how to settle his mind. She thought about that more than she should have. He noticed things too. She understood that, even though he never said so directly. He started leaving an umbrella by the door on mornings when the weather app showed rain, positioned slightly toward her side. He never mentioned it. She never thanked him. But she used it every time, and when she came home, she put it back in exactly the same place. When her work laptop stopped charging properly in the third week, she came home to find it on the counter, fully charged, with the cable reattached at a different angle. She checked the port. He had gently adjusted something inside with a precision tool, the kind architects carried. She sat on the couch for a long time not knowing what to feel. "You fixed my laptop," she said when he came out of his room. The cable angle was wrong. It was grounding improperly. "How did you even know to do that?" "I studied electronics before architecture." He paused. "You were working on a deadline, I could tell by the humming." She looked at him. He was looking at the wall just past her left shoulder, which she had come to understand was what he did when he was saying something real. "Thank you," she said. "It was nothing," he said. But neither of them moved for a moment, and the apartment felt very small and very quiet, and she was suddenly aware of the exact distance between them. The power outage happened on a Thursday. Not just the building, the whole district went down at 8 in the evening, and the emergency notifications said it wouldn't be restored until morning. No Wi-Fi, no screens, Just two people in an apartment lit by the three candles Adaeze had in her bedside drawer and one small torch from Jae-hoon's emergency kit, because of course he had an emergency kit. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, because where else was there to sit, and the silence stretched out until Adaeze said, "Okay, this is unbearable. Tell me something real." Jae-hoon looked at her. "What kind of something real?" "Something you don't usually tell people. Something that matters." A long pause. "I gave up competitive swimming at 17, he said, because my father told me it wasn't a serious career. I was nationally ranked. I've never told anyone that." She didn't say anything for a moment. "I failed my first university entrance exam," she said. "Not by a little. Badly. I told everyone I deferred by choice. I spent 6 months completely falling apart before I sat it again. My mother was the only person who knew." He looked at her then, really looked. "Did it get better?" he asked. "I got better," she said, "which isn't the same thing, but it was enough." They talked until 2 in the morning. About families and the weight of expectation. About the specific loneliness of being the person everyone else counted on. About the strange relief of being somewhere new, where no one knew your history and you could be just yourself for a while, whichever version of yourself that turned out to be. At some point, the candles burned low, and they were sitting closer together than they had started, and neither of them had moved deliberately. And Adaeze was looking at his profile in the low light, thinking about the swimmer he had been at 17. This quiet, precise man who had once moved through water at speed, who had given it up because someone told him to. And she felt something crack open in her chest that she didn't have a name for yet. The next day they went out. It wasn't planned. She was going to the Mangwon market and he was going to a site visit nearby, and they ended up on the same subway platform, and he said, "Which way are you going?" And she told him, and he said, "I'll walk with you to the market," and that turned into 3 hours. Tidiakbaki from a cart near the river. Wandering through the Saturday market with its towers of persimmons and stacks of hand-dyed fabric. Standing on the Han River bank in the afternoon wind, watching the water, not saying much, not needing to. An elderly woman, selling chestnuts, smiled at them and said something in Korean. Adaeze looked at Jae-hoon. What did she say? He paused before answering. She said we look well matched. Adaeze looked back at the river. What did you say back? Another pause. I thanked her. She did not look at him, but she was smiling, and she knew he could see it, and she didn't try to stop. The truth came out on an ordinary Wednesday evening. She had stayed late at work and come home to find an unfamiliar car parked outside the building and 2 people in expensive coats standing in the living room. Jae-hoon was standing very still, the way he went still when something was costing him effort. The woman turned when Adaeze entered. She was elegant and cold-eyed, and she looked at Adaeze the way people look at things that have appeared in the wrong place. Who is this? The woman asked. My co-occupant, Jae-hoon said carefully. There was a booking error, I told you about this. You didn't mention she was. The woman stopped, rearranged her expression. We came to discuss the Incheon proposal. This isn't appropriate timing. After they left, Adaeze found him standing on the balcony. That was your mother, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And the man with her. My father. She waited. I'm not just an architect on a city contract, he said finally. My family owns Shin Construction Group. We're one of the 3 largest construction firms in Korea. He said it flatly, like reading a fact from a document. I moved out of the family home 2 years ago because I wanted to know if I could build something real on my own. Without the name, without the resources, just, he exhaled, just me. She looked at him for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? Because you treated me like a person, he said. Not a last name, not a business connection. You argued with me about the thermostat like I was nobody, and it was the most honest thing anyone had done in years. She didn't know what to say, so she said, Your mother looked at me like I was furniture. I know. She's not going to approve of. She stopped. Of what? He asked quietly. She didn't answer. She went inside. but she felt his eyes on her back and her hands were not entirely steady. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 28 days in. Mr. Beek had found a unit, a one-bedroom on the 8th floor of a building in Yeonnam-dong, available immediately. Same price. She could move in by the weekend. She stood in the kitchen holding her phone after the call ended and looked at the apartment. The balcony plants she had started watering when she noticed he kept forgetting. Her color-coded notebook on the coffee table next to his sketchbook, which had somehow become their default arrangement. The mug she had started using every morning because it was exactly the right size for her hands, which she had only later noticed was his. She packed her bags on Friday night. She did it methodically, the way she did everything, folding each item and placing it precisely in the case. She took down her reference images from the wall and unpinned her mood boards. She peeled her sticky notes off the kitchen cupboards. She left the plants on the balcony because they belonged to the apartment, not to her. She left before 5 in the morning, so she wouldn't have to say anything complicated. But he was in the kitchen when she came out with her suitcase. Coffee already made, 2 cups. "You're awake," she said, which was perhaps the least interesting thing she had ever said to anyone. "I wake up at dawn," he said. "You know that." She stood there with her suitcase in her hand and looked at him in the early morning kitchen light. This man she had met in a doorway arguing about who had more right to place. And she thought about the food he had left covered on the counter and the umbrella by the door, and the way he had fixed her laptop without being asked, and the elderly woman by the river who had said they looked well-matched. "This was never going to be permanent," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I know," he said. "We were strangers who got assigned the same apartment by mistake." "I know that too." She looked at him. He was looking at her with his hands around his coffee mug, and his expression was the one she had come to recognize as him saying something real. She picked up her suitcase handle. "Goodbye, Jae-hoon." "Goodbye, Adaeze." She walked out. The door clicked behind her. Yeonnam-dong was a good neighborhood. Her new apartment was clean and quiet and entirely hers, with no one else's shoes by the door or someone else's mug in the cupboard. It was everything she had originally wanted. She sat in it for 4 days and did not understand why it felt so much emptier than a place she had only lived in for a month. On the 5th day, her phone rang. Unknown number, Seoul area code. She almost didn't answer. "There's been another booking error," said a voice she recognized immediately. Calm, dry, exactly the same. She sat up slowly. "Excuse me." "A significant one," Jae-hoon said. "Affecting an apartment in Mapogu, possibly irreversible." "What kind of booking error?" "The kind where I went to the agency yesterday and signed a 2-person lease on a unit I've been standing in front of for 3 days trying to talk myself out of." She was quiet. "There are 2 keys," he said. "The building is near the river. The balcony faces east. I already told them about the plants." She could hear from his voice that it had cost him something to call. That it had cost him more than she would probably ever fully understand, from a man who kept things folded and ordered and protected, to lay something down this openly. "Jae-hoon," she said. "I know it's unconventional." "It's insane," she said. "We met a month ago." "I know. Your family is a separate matter, one I intend to handle. I have 6 months left on my internship, and then I don't know what comes next." "Neither do I," he said. "I never know what comes next. I draw plans for buildings for a living, and I could not have planned a single thing that has happened since you walked through that door with a suitcase and told me to get out." She laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it, a real laugh, and she pressed her hand to her mouth like that would help. "I don't even know if I'm staying in Seoul after the internship," she said, when she could speak again. "Then I'd like to know what you decide," he said. "And everything between now and then, I'd like not to miss any of it." She looked around her quiet, correct, empty apartment. "You already bought plants, didn't you?" she said. A pause. "They're on the balcony," he said. "They need water twice a week." She closed her eyes. "I'm going to need my own key," she said. My own shelf in the bathroom, and I'm keeping the yellow sticky notes. That is non-negotiable. I expected nothing less, he said. And no complaints about humming. Adaeze. What? A beat. Please come home, he said. She sat with that for a moment. Just one moment, with the word home and everything it was carrying. Then she picked up her keys. Months later, the apartment in Mapogu was full of things that had arrived gradually and chosen to stay. Plants that had been repotted twice. A shelf in the living room that held her design awards and his architectural models side by side, because the shelf had run out of room and neither of them had moved anything to make space. They had just made a new arrangement that fit them both. A framed yellow sticky note on the wall near the kitchen. The original house rules from the first apartment, unearthed from the pocket of her coat where she had never quite managed to throw it away. Adaeze had been offered a full-time position at the company. She had asked for a week to think about it. Jae-hoon had finished the waterfront project and had 3 new proposals on his desk under his own name. No family backing, no Shin Group letterhead. On a Saturday morning in autumn, she was at the counter working and he was on the balcony with his sketchbook. And she looked up and through the glass and watched him draw with the focused stillness that still, after everything, made her think of a swimmer at the edge of a pool. She went out. I'm going to take the job, she said. He looked up from the sketchbook. You already decided, he said. It wasn't a question. I decided 3 days ago. I just wanted to say it out loud. He held out his hand, and she sat on the balcony chair next to him, and he went back to sketching, and she leaned her head on his shoulder and looked out over the neighborhood that had become, without her ever quite planning it, the place she came back to. Can you believe, she said, that we almost went to court over a 1-bedroom apartment? He turned a page in his sketchbook. I would have one, he said. You absolutely would not have one. I had a legally binding contract. So did I. Mine was signed first. You don't know that. I do know that. I checked the timestamps. He was almost smiling. She could hear it. Mine was signed at 9:47 a.m. Yours was. I don't want to know, she said, pressing her face into his shoulder. Don't tell me. He laughed. A real one, full and unhurried, the kind she had worked for without knowing she was working for it, back in those first strange weeks of sticky notes and arguments and covered plates left on counters. She thought about the woman who had arrived at that doorway exhausted, and certain and completely sure she knew what the next chapter of her life was going to look like. She had not expected this. She had not planned for him. But then the best things rarely gave you warning. They simply arrived, sometimes through the wrong door, at the wrong time, with all the wrong paperwork, and turned out to be exactly right. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have stayed or walked away? We read every single one. And if you know someone who has ever arrived somewhere exhausted and uncertain and found something they never planned for, share this story with them. Sometimes the wrong address is the right one all along. See you in the next story. We will be right here, always waiting.